Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nyambura and this is 100 on Books. Today I'm joined by
Don Handa,
who is my co-host on Corpus podcast and also my platonic life partner. So, he has to support me in all my ventures, because what's the point of a platonic life partner if not to be supportive?
True.
Exactly. And today we are at
Red Hill Art Gallery,
where we came to see a show by
Ashanti Gidinchi.
We're going to have some outtakes at the end of the video. By we, I mean I, because Don is like, not my monkey, not my forest. But where we also have an audience member. This is a first, by the way. This is a channel first.
The podcast is growing. The booktube channel is growing.
Honestly, this is our first live video recording.
And on location recording.
Yeah, exactly. And so Don is here partly because honestly I only finished like 3 books this week, and I know that for some of you girls you're like, yes queen, 3 books, but let's be honest, that's nothing. And one of those books was 7 Days in the Art World
by Sarah Thornton. Yes.
And I was telling Don that book don't be banging. Like, that book could have been a banger, but it did not.
Wasn't.
Yeah, it did not bang. And
Seymour.
Okay, how do I say this? When you can see all the ingredients, but like, actually, funny story. When my brother was young, Don obviously knows my brother because like he is my life partner. So,
he's really our brother.
Yeah, exactly. He went to my aunt's house, and like my aunt had like chopped up all of these things, onions, tomatoes, some garlic, some blah blah blah. But when the food arrived at the table, my brother was like, "Where is the food you are making in the kitchen?" By which he meant like all that stuff looked like it was going to be, really delicious, but the food in front of him it wasn't, as the youth say, giving what he said he was going to give. And that's that.
That's the same thing.
Really, it's like it had the garlic, the onion, the tomato. It had, like
the chapters,
exactly
axis.
The little cheese that could go into like that sauce or whatever. But when you eat it, you're just like, hey, bora uhai, like.
Okay, but if
as long as I've eaten, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, but if that wasn't
fed,
a good book,
.
What's a good art book that you have read?
Oh, the 12 million Stuffed Shark. Don't talk about the 12 million.
I don't want to talk about it. This is your channel. Tell us about the 12
million. Okay, actually, the 12 million Stuffed Shark is why this series. Because that's why Don is here. Don is here to launch the series. This is like,
yes, to members in the audience, it is about a work of art that is a stuffed shark.
Yes, by Jamia Posta. Yeah, we couldn't make this stuff up if we tried, and we are not even trying at this point. Like, it just writes itself. So don't you remember the author is called Don
Thompson.
Yeah, and story. This has happened before on this channel where I mentioned that Don and I have a shared library card. So sometimes he borrows a book and it looks so good, I read it before him, because despite the fact that I've only finished 3 books this week, I'm usually the first reader in this relationship.
It's a delicate balance, but I think
it really is. I feel like it's one of those ecosystems where if we don't disturb it, it'll just keep thriving.
Self-sustaining and thing.
Exactly. And so Don borrowed the book, but I listened to it, and oh my gosh, like, I used to take longer walks and I was listening to that audiobook just so I could listen to more of it, because I have this weird rule where I have to be doing something when I'm listening to an audiobook, and I try not to listen to audiobooks indoors. Indoors, I like to listen to the radio, or to listen to like podcasts. Like,
shout out to the Beeb.
Exactly, honestly, shout out to the Beeb. And the Voice of America, and China Radio International, and Radio France International. You're getting the drift here.
Okay, international.
It's giving very much like self-hatred, because why don't I listen to KBC?
One question that need answer.
The audience has left. The audience member has left.
It was lovely.
I think it's really like a commentary on what we are doing here, that the one person who thought to stay has left.
So I guess the video is over now. Or is it?
Of course not. Still we persist.
Still we rise. Tell us about the shark.
Should have never given you people poetry, because what was that? Anyway, and so I don't even want to talk about the shack. I want to talk about the book.
So the setup is we have an economist who also happens to be an art lover, an enthusiast, and art collector himself. And so he sets out to write this book to try and understand how the art market works. So he's talking about artists, he's talking about auction houses, he's talking about pricing, he's talking about art fairs, and really just trying to make sense of this sort of unwieldy beast that is the selling of art internationally. Yeah. Hijinks ensue, as happens with art.
Yeah, and like he does such a good job of talking about the business of art, the cultural context in which it's being made, and all of that. Like, I don't know, it's really just, and it straddles this fine line where it's not talking down to the audience, but it's also the sort of thing that would be interesting to someone like Don, who for context is an art worker and who really loves art. So it's not like he's not coming from zero, but the way Thompson writes even about familiar art, familiar events, and so on is so exciting, so refreshing that you.
And I think the thing about it is writing from, I mean, not quite an outsider. I mean, clearly he has some access and he has some knowledge, but he manages to not condescend to the reader or to the subject, the art world as well, which I think is sort of the thing with struggle with 7 days in the art world. There's this tone like, oh my god, look at this weird, ridiculous system that we all seem to have bought into.
Yeah.
Whereas with the $12 million stuff Shark, you have more of a sense of someone genuinely trying to make sense of this thing and how it works, and and also it's really interesting how try to sort of touch on pivotal moments that have meant certain events or certain things have become the reality of the art market, like that joke about art fairs being sort of like the art dealer's revenge against auction houses or whatever.
And so just having a conversation like this, but more in depth, where we talk about like some books that are in conversation with each other, or some books that are helping us think about certain artists' work, for instance, or certain movements, certain times in history, in art history. We actually started Corpus, our podcast about art, because the idea was actually spawned at this very table. Where we are seated.
Maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah, a small lifetime ago. And you can't see this, but like, the green at the front of the screen is a book, a Bonham's auction catalog.
Africa Now, modern Africa.
Yeah.
Much to be said about modern Africa as a category.
And there's something to be said also about the fact that, say, auction catalogs are some of like the foremost texts about African art and so on. So we were sitting here and reading one of those books, because the couple that owns this gallery collects a lot of art, but also art texts and so on. And we're like, it would be nice to work on an archival project, etc. And it's taken different forms, but the most consistent one so far has been the podcast.
And also the most sort of available one as well.
Yes. And so that's something that is going to be the goal of this series, is for us to then come in, talk about books, which is not something we really do on the podcast. And the podcast, the way we frame this is that it's not really a space to talk about books per se. We talk about art and we talk to artists and so on. But here the goal will be to talk about art books, as I said, how they're in conversation with each other, how they're helping us think about art, view art, what books we find interesting, maybe because they are very excitingly gossipy, or they are very they really do a good job of giving us a sense of a certain time, but they're not necessarily like broadening our sense of that time.
Sometimes it's deepening your knowledge, sometimes it's just a little cattiness,
exactly,
for spice.
And sometimes it's also like a book, like for instance John Berger's Ways of Seeing, which there's an episode I'm going to link downstairs where I call it the equivalent of a cat flap.
Basically called John Berger a cat flap. Think about that.
Berger as cat flap. And and for us to have that conversation, and Don is a perfect person to have come on for this series.
Perfect is doing a lot of work, but I'll take it.
You know what? It's my channel. I say Don is the perfect person to have for these conversations, because, as you know, he's one of the loves of my life. Love of my life.
I don't think it's a music podcast, but it's your podcast, as you said.
He's incredibly knowledgeable. Usually very modest. For no reason we can deduce. It's like, bestie, what are you doing? So it's also generally for me always refreshing to be encountering art with him, like for instance this show we've seen today, and to be encountering art texts with him and so on. And it'd be nice to have him come regularly. I mean, obviously it's not going to be every time I only finish 3 books. Sometimes I just have to grit my teeth and talk about the 3 books. Do you know what I mean? Like, but
Once in a while.
Yeah, he'll come in once in a while. You know, it's we're not promising anything. We're not saying every 6 weeks Don will be here, but maybe Don will be here every 6 weeks.
But you know, like the flu, it comes around eventually.
Yes. Wow. We're in a Parapanda, and this is what you choose to discuss.
Parapanda Lilia, here we are.
It is what it is, honestly. So that's it from me this week. Just say the series will be coming soon. We already talked about a few books, which I'll put links to downstairs. And yeah, more books to come. We'll obviously focus on, you know, modern art, African art,
contemporary
African art, and so on. But also like the art world, the mechanics of, you know, the art industry and so on. And yeah, like, tell us in the comments what you're interested in us talking about. You know, maybe there's something that you're curious about and you're like, oh, I read this book and I'd like for y'all to talk about it. We'd love to do something like that. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much
Don,
for having me.
This was so much fun for someone who was ambushed.
Literally did not have any knowledge about this episode an hour ago, and yet here we are.
He was a really good sport. So please like, comment, subscribe, share, and all of the good things, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye bye.